Good evening, everyone. So the- we're recording, so let's get into it. It is our immense pleasure here to welcome our guests tonight for the first program director panel hosted by Med School Mentor. Our guests today are not only powerhouses in medicine and research, but have also chosen to dedicate their time to furthering the education of medical students and residents. Undoubtedly, this effort is an important part of what makes their institution some of the largest, not only in the US, but also the world. So please join us in welcoming Dr. Brian Nahad from Massachusetts General Hospital, Dr. Jeffrey Greenfield from Weill Cornell Medicine, Dr. Raj Mukherjee from Johns Hopkins Medicine. Neurosurgery is one of the most competitive specialties year after year in the ARIS-MED process, and we are extremely grateful for you all having agreed to be here with us today to help shed light on this whole thing. Our session is going to follow a presentation Q&A format. So we would like to ask each of you to briefly introduce yourselves and your programs, how many residents you have per year, how it's structured, and yeah, just walk us through that a little bit.
Who should go first?
So yeah, I think we can do this alphabetically if that's easier.
Sure. I'll start. Yeah, thanks. And Pedro, thanks for inviting us. And I imagine we'll hear similar themes throughout the presentation today. But my name is Jeff Greenfield, and I'm representing the Weill Cornell program. We are a combined program at Weill Cornell Medicine, which is New York Presbyterian Hospital, and then Memorial Sloan Kettering. And we are a New York City-based program. Cornell can sometimes be confusing because the undergrad is upstate, but we're New York City, and along with NYU, Columbia, Mount Sinai, we represent a really dense population of amazing programs in the Northeast corridor. We have a incredibly busy program that is maybe one of the busiest two resident per year programs in the country, and you'll hear various size programs give you the various pros and cons of different configurations. A lot of programs have been expanding, and we've been holding tight with two residents a year for various reasons, mainly due to what we've seen as some competing pressures on residents' time, case volume, surgical prowess over the last 10 or 15 years. And so we've been really trying to make sure we maintain as much control over the operative experience that our residents have. There are some things that you lose by having a smaller program, some things you gain. We still have a protected research time of 18 months, which I think is still pretty good compared to many programs out there, and really do emphasize a high percentage of research-oriented applicants. A fair number of our good percentage of our faculty are MD PhDs, as are our applicants, but by no means is that something that we exclusively look for. I think that throughout the course of the program, we'll give you some of our pearls in terms of what we've learned as program directors, what we can give you guys as advice, both for U.S. medical school pending graduates as well as international graduates. It's obviously incredibly competitive, but there are a lot of things that I think we can probably impart to you. I'll leave that for the questions and see where you guys want to take the conversation, but more than happy to provide guidance when I can. And well, I'm sure we're all happy to share our emails and contact information afterwards. So glad to be here. Thanks, Pedro, and pass it off to, looks like Raj by one letter.
Sure. Thanks so much, Jeff. So let's see. And Pedro, you did want me to go through like a presentation?
Yeah, we'd love that.
Okay. So
we realize we gave you a narrow time window. Sorry about that.
Sure. Yeah. And if this is boring, someone just raise their hand and I'll stop immediately. So I was tasked to tell you a little bit about myself, a little bit about our program, and then to give some advice. My contact info is in the bottom here. It's just Dr. Raj at JHMI for Johns Hopkins Medical Institute.edu. That's my cell phone number. But if you can email first, that might be nice. Just because whenever someone calls, it's my first question is always, is everything okay? But it's great to be here with you all. Let's see here. So my lineage in terms of neurosurgery, just for me personally, goes back to when I was a postdoc with Alfredo Quinones at Johns Hopkins back in 2009. Getting a master's of public health here, doing a postdoc here. Actually went to neurosurgery residency at Cedars-Sinai, where my chair was Keith Black. During that time, I had some protected research. I did a Robert Wood Johnson Health and Society Scholars Fellowship, actually a research fellowship. I was at University of Wisconsin, where I had the pleasure of interacting with Mustafa Biskaya and Bob Dempsey and the wonderful team at UW-Madison. Thereafter, I was a skull-based fellow at University of Pittsburgh, and I was really fortunate to be the last fellow that trained both under Dr. Gardner and Dr. Fernandez-Miranda. Or Dr. Fernandez-Miranda went to Stanford. And then since 2018, I've been on the faculty at Johns Hopkins, where I've had a chance to work particularly with Judy Huang, who's our program director, and Dr. Henry Brem, who until recently was our program director. So I've been really all over the country at places, and the market institutions still guides how I practice today. In terms of where I'm at now, I'm at Johns Hopkins. We are a 4-year residency program. We have a lineage that everyone kind of knows about. So you go down the halls and you see, where Dandy did an X-ray at one time. You have all these sort of historical artifacts on campus, but I think we really pride ourselves on trying to be innovative and moving forward. As of recently, just a few months ago, Chetan Bedagauda has been named our chair. So we're all excited about all the new opportunities that are coming. And again, Dr. Huang is our program director, and we actually have 4 assistant program directors that are in the areas of pediatrics, spine, tumor, and vascular and endovascular. We have a lot of full-time clinical faculty. We have a lot of dynamic associate and assistant professors. Great place to be. It's a great place to rotate if you have time and interest. And one of the great jewels of our program are the 27 neurosurgery residents that we have. This is a slightly older picture, but they inspire us. They push us forward. They take great care of our patients. And one of the greatest joys as a teacher, as a program director, is to be able to see them shine in their next phase of life. And then in terms of my advice, especially for those who are PGY4s, I typically go through this calendar. So we're well through the calendar at this point, but for those who are rising PGY4s or PGY3s at this point, really helpful, I think, to have some check-in time points with your sponsor or mentor before even the sub-I season gets started. This is for the next cycle, as well as to meet the PD, just so that you have a sense of, so that they know who you are and you know who they are, to really set up a sub-I strategy in the spring. Later in the spring, I think it's helpful to strategize where you're going to do electives, including maybe like neuroradiology and neurocritical care prior to doing sub-internships, and actually start prepping your ERAS application even before you get into sub-I season. We're right towards the end of sub-I season now, and that's usually a good time to check in with your mentor or sponsor to let them know how things went, to really develop a signal strategy, which is particularly critical now that signals are within the ERAS application. October to January is usually the most fun time, I think, of the season. You get to meet colleagues from across the country. You get to meet faculty members that you've just read about or seen on webinars. And so hopefully everyone gets to really soak in that time and enjoy. There's a lot of things that happen in February, really finalizing your rank list first within yourself and with your loved ones, then with your mentor, then ideally with your program director and chair. And to really have a rank strategy all leading up to the match. So I know people are in various aspects of the cycle now or not even in it yet, but hopefully having this bit of a calendar can be helpful. I'll finish there. Again, Hopkins is a great place, as are all these other places, but happy to answer. Please don't hesitate to reach out. Here's my contact info at the bottom. Thanks.
All right, I think I'm next. Hi, everyone. I'm Brian Nahead. I'm the program director at Mass General in Boston, which has gone through a lot of change. Obviously, we've now integrated our department with the other program in Boston, which was traditionally under Partners, is now called Mass General Brigham. So we're actually a very, very large department now, and much like Jeff mentioned, it's a very competitive ecosystem in the New York space as is in the Boston one. Now, despite being an integrated department, we are still two separate residencies at the moment. I'm the program director of the Mass General one, and I'm happy to speak about it. We're three residents a year, and we have one of the few programs left that still has 2 years of dedicated academic interests as our PGY 4 and 5. And we really love that time because it lets people traditionally work in labs, but more recently pursue other degrees, do global work, global neurosurgery work, and then also even launch careers in innovation or some type of startup. We have a pretty high case volume, but we really pride ourselves on not only getting our residents the best training they have, much like you heard at Hopkins and Cornell, and many other programs that have been featured in this webinar. But one of the big things, no matter where you train, is really finding the right place and the right ecosystem for you. And that can not only help you grow as a surgeon, but ideally something additional to it. And whether that's a research interest, whether that's some type of administrative or education interest or a startup or innovation, we like to think that we have a pretty awesome place and certainly would welcome anybody reaching out to us if you were interested in the program or doing a sub-I or for those students who want to do a rotation. I will stop there because I think my two prior speakers covered just about everything you need to know. And I think why don't we just jump into the questions?
That sounds great. Thank you all very much for walking us through that. I would also like to thank here, I forgot before I apologize. Thank you very much, Dr. Zima, as well for being here with us. It's very nice to have you here as someone who has gone through that process. He's currently a PGY 7.
Thank you so much. I want to say thank you to our panelists. It's really wonderful to be here.
So let's kick off the Q&A portion then. So the first question is that we had is when you are reviewing applications, what are typically the first three things that catch your eye or weigh most heavily when you begin the process of ranking applicants? And then I would like to direct this question to Dr. Greenfield.
Great. Yeah, this is actually it's a fantastic question because I've recently had this debate with some of my partners on how to streamline the applications. Applications are now coming in at sometimes 30 or 40 pages. So thank you very much to all of the medical students who have made our lives harder. Your prowess is sometimes hard to navigate through. And so, we've questioned, well, do we really need all 40 pages? Can anyone really comprehend 40 pages? We're getting 250 applications. So there has to be some honesty in terms of the fact that we can't read 240 applications cover to cover. So it's a great question, Pedro, in terms of how do we wean that down? Look, some of it is going to be intuitive. Kids that are coming from fantastic medical schools will probably have a quicker look at their CV. We're going to say, look, you're coming from Harvard or you're coming from Hopkins. You've already been vetted to some degree, but that is just the tip of the iceberg. We definitely interview kids that are international and from really small, out of the way medical schools, but there has to be something in the application that catches one's eye. And that's exactly kind of the question that you're asking. Typically, the things that I look for are, and they may be different than what Brian and Raj look for, and they're definitely different than some of my partners. I found out that one of my partners really cares mostly about like board scores and the GPA because he thinks that's gonna best predict how the kids do during their residency. And I'm like, I don't really trust medical school grades anymore. They seem pretty inflated. I like going to the letter from the mentor to see what they say. I like looking briefly through the research portfolio to see what they've done, how they spent their time. Most kids are taking time off, and was this productive? Was it goal oriented? And then I try to get a sense of what their narrative is of their arc. I want to be able to read the application and then 30 minutes later be able to give like a one-liner, like this is who the kid is. And it's typically not the 50 publication student. It's typically someone who's spent some time in a lab, has generated 2 or 3 really good articles, has spent some time doing clinical research in the area that research is generated in, and can really talk elegantly in their statement about how it's inspired them to become a neurosurgeon. I think that's kind of what I look for, so I can get a sense of who this person is. The sub-I is a totally different thing. And those of you who are, you know, planning where to do your sub-Is, that is, up here in terms of, like how we will judge you. That's your 30-day interview. And so that's a totally different category. If you're coming to a program and you're basically sending in your application cold, where you don't know anything about you, I personally try to get as much of a flavor I can. And so getting really good letters from mentors, not generic um, chairman letters, I'm sorry to say. They've got to be, personal letters where we get a sense for who you are as a student. And then, then I delve in further from there. But there are going to be some things that have to stand out. And if you're from a great school, it's an advantage. If you're not from a great school, there has to be something there that catches our eye. And all flavors are welcome and are interviewed. And I think that's kind of maybe my first go around at answering that question. I think probably Raj and Brian can add to that and probably have slightly different perspectives.
Yeah, I would say, unfortunately, nowadays we don't have that many data points anymore. So we don't have a step one score, for all of its fallacies. It still gave us an objective number. So, but we don't have that. Many schools don't have grades. Many schools don't have AOA. So we are left with basically what Dr. Greenfield referred to. So I would say, practically speaking, the most important thing oftentimes for me are the letters. Ideally from your mentor, like you mentioned, if they're detailed and they're personal and they say things like, they would want you to take care of their family member, or, you're dependable and honest, those kinds of things, it really does mean a lot. I think sometimes letters from sub-internships can be helpful. There are particular places that are known for giving just like really detailed, wonderful letters. And when I see a letter from some of those places, I go to it because I actually get a lot of information about that person, about their story. So I think letters are probably, to me, probably the most important. In terms of, I would say second are probably publications, or some sense of what your sort of scientific or academic inquisitiveness and inquiry, sort of where that might have led you. It doesn't necessarily mean a huge number of publications, but again, like Dr. Greenfield said, sort of the story and your ability to take something from a thought to completion, I think is the most important thing. So for instance, a student who maybe is not at a powerhouse place that is just known to publish, dozens and dozens of papers per medical student per year, it actually might mean a lot if they at a smaller institution have a couple papers and took it to completion. That really is it's an important data point. It's a soft data point, but it's an important data point. And then the third bit, for me, it's not necessarily the personal statement itself, but it is trying to figure out, what is this person, what is their aspiration, what is their vision, what's their motivation? And you try to get that from as many sources as you can. A personal statement, it usually doesn't hurt anyone, but it can help. If there's something unique about your life story or about your motivation, it's a great place within the application to try to shine. So that helps.
Yeah, I would just echo. I love both of those, and I think it encapsulates, thankfully, where our field has gone, which is no longer looking for that very, very high board score. And you're right, that data point is gone, but it's really the idea of who is the right person for not only the program but the field, and the ability to convey that in an application is, I think, the strength of hopefully a good application. I look to the letters like every single time, and the home one, but largely the away ones. And I think the away sub-Is are really, really important because you were able to not only succeed somewhere else, but more importantly, it's somewhat of an objective measure of who you are. And then number two would be, so whatever your work product is, it almost always is publications, but we've had some really interesting folks who've done really cool things, and it just depends on what that is. We absolutely do not expect somebody who is not at a place where NIH funding is really high to have 10 or 12 Nature papers. It's just, we're more looking for, with the resources you're given, what you've done and how have you sort of exceeded what one would expect. And often that's the best predictor. To get to Dr. Greenfield's point, I think I totally agree. I don't think board scores or even GPA means anything. Anyone can have a good day or a bad day, but I think your totality of your record is hopefully what the application can convey. But for us, it's usually like your work product and then the letters, which is largely your work product and a sub-I. So
Can I add one thing there just to reemphasize for the students, because my own Cornell students, the number one question they have, they bring me their CV. Is the CV, is it thick enough? Are there enough papers in this here? And I have one anecdote that I share with them just because it's really exemplifies the philosophy here, and that is, we had a student about a decade ago who just recently graduated our program, but when he was applying, um, had a single paper. It was a first author cell paper. And he came in and wowed us. He conceived of it, he wrote it. It was, 5 years of his life. And we're like, that is so much more telling of what he's capable of than someone who's on, 25, spine outcomes papers. No apologies to anyone who's doing spine outcomes research. It's just a random example. So please, yeah, it's really, it's the excellence and your dedication and your ability to convey your role in the project, which is far more important than the volume to me, and it sounds like to them as well.
Thank you so much. Like Pedro said, I'm Dr. Laura Zyma. I'm one of the seventh years at UT Houston. This is kind of a segue into the next question, as you all kind of gave some details about research. Kind of mentioned that you're not necessarily looking for volume. Is it really how they're able to kind of describe themselves and what they did on the project in the interview? And if someone had done a project that wasn't necessarily directly related to neurosurgery, would that be something that would hurt them? Do you really want people to have specifically kind of neurosurgery oriented research?
I'm happy to jump on that one. I think
That'd be great.
it's always helpful to have done stuff so that your interviewer might necessarily understand it, but we don't necessarily care if it's in neurosurgery or outside because some people come to this field a little bit later. It really does come down to what you have done, and I love that story of that of your. It sounds like now graduated chief. It really is. Did you come up with the idea and take it all the way through? That's a pretty impressive thing to do. Now, not everybody can do it, and not everyone has the chance to do it. But I think what that tells isn't the fact that you went from start to finish, but that the fact that you were able to put your all in and you had a product. But some of the most compelling interviews sometimes are people who say, I had this amazing idea and it failed, but this was what I was going to do. Laura, I think what you're touching on is the ability to arc the story around what interests you and why you did it, and more importantly, what you did when you had the chance. I think that's way more important about whether or not you got it published or not, or if it was a high journal or not. And it's very easy to tell when somebody is just, peripherally involved versus someone went all in. Now, often we get asked, do I have to take a year off or should I do a PhD? And I think we tend to say, do whatever it is that you're really interested in. Mostly, if you look at our applicants, I'd say half are MD, PhD, half are not. And then if you look at the people who match, it's about half and half. So it's not like you get an advantage one way or the other. And of the ones who didn't do a PhD, about half end up doing an extra year and half go straight through. But it's really comes down to the individual applicant and what they can actually achieve, and do they feel comfortable? And Raj said this so perfectly, is like you really want to check in with your mentors so you have somebody to bounce your application or your thoughts by as you're getting through.
And I'd say a couple things. Sometimes taking a year off can actually be a little bit detrimental, or it can be I want to say detrimental, but it can be a little bit of at least a yellow flag, because if you take a whole year off and you're actually not that productive, it could be when you see the application, it's, well, what did they do for the year? As opposed to someone who goes straight through and is very productive despite having not had a dedicated year off. That's particularly impressive, I think, sometimes. So, there is always an opportunity cost in life, and a year of life, and a year of lost earnings and things like that, if you think about it, can be a lot. So I think what Dr. Ney had said about sort of following your passion. I think that's the most important thing, because hopefully if you're really passionate about something, you will secondarily, as almost default, you'll be productive. And so hopefully that's a helpful perspective. And I will say there is one pretty famous story that has some Hopkins and Harvard connections that Dr. Brem used to always say about someone who had done research outside of neurosurgery. And so when Dr. Brem was a junior faculty, there was a really brilliant student at Hopkins who was interested in urology. And apparently this person was going to be like the top, the top sought after urology applicant like in the country. And apparently this person, as they got to their fourth year, rotated on neurosurgery and really loved it and decided to switch. And so they met with Dr. Brem and said, what do you think I should do? Should I take a year off, even though, I've done all this, prostate cancer stuff? Would anyone actually find it interesting? And so Dr. Brem told him, no, just, you have a great application, just to see what happens. And that person apparently was Bob Carter, who, is the superstar in neurosurgery and was, chair of Mass General and things like that. So I think, it's maybe one example of, follow your passions and see, what adventures life takes you on.
Thank you for sharing your insights so far. So I would like to ask you, Professor Mukherjee, about research fellowships. From your perspective, do these fellowships meaningfully improve a candidate's chances of matching, and what outcomes from the fellowship do you find most valuable when evaluating applicants?
Yeah, I would say to me, I think what's most valuable about applying for research fellowships, whether they're a summer NREF kind of a fellowship, or it's a year-long kind of American Brain Tumor Association, or a longer kind of a thing, is not so much having that one line on your CV. It is the time that it takes to think through a problem, to think through something that might be interesting to you, and an opportunity, frankly, to develop a mentor-mentee relationship. That's the most important thing. So to me, we have a chance. I often have a chance to meet with the first-year medical students, leading up to oftentimes in October, November or so, because a lot of those, summertime applications are due in November, December, January. And it's great. It gives us something to talk about. It's a conduit to mentorship, is how I think of research in a lot of ways, because otherwise, what is there to talk about? Otherwise, it may be two nice people in a room, but it gets a little awkward after 20 minutes. And so if you have a project that you're thinking about working towards developing, whether you get the award or not, almost doesn't matter. It's really about developing that relationship. And I think that's the most important thing.
I can't improve on that answer. Yeah, I just wanted to say that I think the question about what I look for in an application, I think that would be really impressive. I do think I left that one out, but if someone has, taken a year off between the second and third year and has gotten, $40,000 grant from the, American Brain Tumor Association, that actually, for the reasons that Raj outlined in terms of the commitment to that, the writing, the conceptualization of it, and the dedication to that time, that is impressive. So I do think that there's probably some validity in spending the time to do that. So yeah, just to piggyback on his answer.
Moving on to a little bit of a different topic, you all kind of mentioned how difficult it is to have any objective measures now, with step one being pass-fail and most medical school grades being pass-fail. What about, how does your program evaluate and view step two CK scores? Do you use them to screen candidates at all? Is there any threshold that you're looking for when you're looking at that step two CK score?
So I can say for Hopkins, and maybe this is going to be too transparent, but I'll put it out there. I think historically over the last few years, we have screened based on signals, because there's only so many signals that a person can have, and frankly, if we figure if we're not in your top 25 or so places, you may not be that interested in us. So that's one main screening point is signaling. Beyond that, we actually don't have a hard a threshold for step two scores. But my looking at the data of who matches and who gets interviews, my sense is that your opportunity to get an interview and to match is a lot greater if you have greater than a 240 at least. And so I don't know if certain places have hard cutoffs or not. And it doesn't, certainly if you get less than a 240, it doesn't mean you're not going to match. You may match at your top place. But I get the sense maybe some places might have cutoff scores. It seems like 240 seems to be, most of the papers seem to be around that threshold. But I would say, especially signals, be very thoughtful about your signals. And that's something that you have to think about before you submit ERAS. So connect with your mentor beforehand to optimize that.
Yeah, I'd say from our perspective, we don't have cutoffs at all. And it gets back to the earlier point where we really do look at the letters in the application. And I'm not entirely sure that step one or step two is a really good indicator that you're going to be a good neurosurgeon. Um, but I think the signaling is, it's still new, but I think it is growing. And I think what Raj said is true, is a lot of programs look, and if they're not in being signaled and there's a certain number that you get, I think it definitely creates at least a pause.
Just the way we do it at Cornell, we don't have any hard cutoffs. The way I've organized the review process is just to have every applicant that comes in is read by myself and two other people. That's all divided out through the department, and we get a 1, 2, or a 3, and the top percentage that we can invite for interviews come based on that. So every application at least read by 3 faculty, and then people can use their own criteria. It's generally worked out pretty well, and I think the signaling data and the step score data would probably fall in line with what my two colleagues have suggested. I've never looked at it inherently. It's one of those things that I think just sort of works out if you have different perspectives reading applications. It'll come back to the mean, and I think that it's worked out well for us in that perspective.
That makes sense. Kind of a follow-up question to that. If you see that someone has completed step 3 at the time of their application and they have a good score, is that a good thing? Or does that kind of not affect how you view the application? Dr. Greenfield, do you want to keep going with that question?
I feel like I rarely see that. Maybe I'm not looking hard enough, but I don't think that that's common. I mean, it's usually intern year or after that they're taking their step 3. So I probably don't weigh that at all, honestly. No.
Yeah, and I would say similarly. I think, yeah, my sense was that was done during intern year. So if anything, it wouldn't raise a red flag, but one would. I'm sure I would look. Oh, why did they take step 3? What have they been doing the last year? Where did they do internship? All that kind of stuff. So.
Don't raise any red flags for Raj. He's gonna.
Yeah. It's all flags. They're yellow or red.
We're getting 250 applications. Make it down the middle.
Yeah, I don't
So,
have.
sorry.
No, I was going to say I agree. I don't have anything to add.
I guess I can say it's a relief for all of us that we can hold off on. But so the next question, you mentioned how you weigh very importantly letters of recommendation from mentors, and there are some places which have some particularly detailed letters. And I guess my question is, there's a lot of variation, right? How do you evaluate these letters? Is there a minimum number from each applicant that you will weight in their application? Is there an optimal number? How do you go about evaluating the whole picture?
I mean, I think it's probably a little bit different for everyone. I think the key is to make sure you have at least one letter from someone who knows you as a person. It's important to get the sub-I letters for sure, and they're generally going to be fairly straightforward and similar, because there's going to be some cutting and pasting. There'll be a paragraph of like narrative of your month there that I think and they usually will pull out some quotes from residents or fellows who can kind of give a flavor to it. But your mentor at home, whether that's a research mentor or a faculty mentor, I think is going to be the bulk of it. And so I think that's you get a sense from reading the letters, do they know this person or not? And if they're just regurgitating the CV, it's probably not going to be all that helpful. So, unfortunately for you guys as med students, it's hard. Faculty members are squeezed really, really tight at the edges. And, obviously we're all here. We're doing this because we, love education and love mentorship, but there's a time constraint to it. And so the earlier you get to your mentors and the earlier you put those, those drafts and those, CVs on their desks, and the gentle nudging always helps, the better it's going to be, because I think that's going to be the key letter that people will read and get a flavor for who you are from.
Yeah, I completely agree with all of that. I would say additionally, in ERAS currently you have a spot for 4 letters. And so I would say, especially given that we're going to be committing the better part of a decade to you, hopefully you can get 4 people to say something nice about you. So I think it's important to try to get 4 letters if you can. I would say, maybe one of those letters, if you were a surgeon scientist or want to be a surgeon scientist and you got a PhD, having your PI maybe write one of those letters, if it's a deeply meaningful thing that you did, would make sense. I would say for most others though, if you don't, if you don't have someone like that to write a letter for you, I would say typically the 4 letters we would ideally want, I think, to see from a neurosurgeon, because it is a small field, and it's nice to get the opinions of neurosurgeons to sort of vouch for you that, yeah, you're committed, you're ready, those kinds of things.
Yeah, and I think just even just to get one more degree granular, it's almost always a home sub-I is one of them, and an away is going to be either the second and third or just second. But I think Raj is right. I think while it is super important on the neurosurgery side, you really want somebody who knows you. And if your PhD mentor or extra year mentor, or frankly, just your research mentor was, like in Raj's example, a prostate cancer person, that is a pretty valuable one if they can really speak to who you are. So I definitely fill the 4 slots, but usually it's the at least 2 or 3 sub-Is in there, and then there's that one extra.
Thank you. Obviously, coming for the interview is kind of the biggest step, and probably one of the most important parts of the process when it comes to actually ranking applicants. Can you share any common mistakes or pitfalls that you've seen people make during the actual interview day, and kind of your advice for that process?
I can go. I think I think some of the best advice that I've broadly heard on that topic of how to prepare or act during interview day or during sub-internships came from Rick Komatar, who's at Miami. And so when he has been in some of these medical student advising sessions, and I've been there, his main advice was just don't be weird. So if you can, you gotta, even if it's important to to be professional. It's important to be respectful to everyone, not just the faculty and the residents, but the support staff, the program coordinators. I think oftentimes, you're going through a long process. It's many months. You're maybe flying across the country at odd hours. It can get really tiring, but it's really important to be a good person and to hold it together, especially for those folks that allow that day to be, because sometimes as students, we might think, oh, we really need to impress a faculty member or the chair or the program director, so on and so forth. But, really being kind and thoughtful to the program coordinators, junior residents, those things are helpful and go a long way. And let us know about your character.
Yeah, I love that answer. I think that's great. And, I think to make it even simpler, from my perspective, is like this is a two-way evaluation. We always remind the applicants here that they're really evaluating us just as much as we're evaluating you. And, this is the prior program director to me used to say that, residency lasts longer than the average marriage in the United States, which is sad, but I think probably true. And so, like, we really want to have this as a, mutual relationship that we're both really excited about. And so just be relaxed and be yourself. I think that's going to be really key. Get to know the people. Don't be nervous or stilted about this process, because I think we're trying to just find it's like, it's speed dating really. Most of the people that are getting interviews at Cornell and Harvard and Hopkins are exceptional candidates, and the resume differences kind of settle out, in the mix. It's really about personality and fit and environment that's going to be, the sauce that gets someone to the top of the rank list. Because I think we could all split hairs about how to judge candidates. I think it's just about as easy as judging quarterbacks in the NFL draft. I mean, it's rarely right. So it's more about how we like you, how you like us, and how the residents, jive with you during the dinners and social hours. So just try to relax with the process. I know it's, completely unnerving, but it's really just about getting to know each other.
Yeah, I just want to echo that. It's literally what we say at the morning of our interviews is just relax. And honestly, once you make it to the interview, it's a blank slate, and it's a chance to really get to know the program. I love that you said that. And we feel the same way, that our applicants are interviewing us as we're interviewing them. And it's not even an interview, it's just a conversation. And it's mostly to see how you think and what you think of us, and also what you want to do with your life. And those are usually the themes that hit our different rooms. Um, but I view the interview as a really great time for the applicant to not only convey, who they are, if it's hard to figure that out on a piece of paper, but more importantly, just to see how they think when you ask them just general questions that, often, well, I had someone once ask me, like, do you want to get a call from that person at 2 in the morning? And it's sort of a very specific question, but what it tells you is like you really want to know who you're interviewing, and that's their chance.
I would just say
That makes sense.
one other thing just about the interview season. I hope everyone has a wonderful, lovely time. It's in medical school, you're at a medical school, then you're at a residency, maybe you're at a fellowship, and then maybe at a job. And so you're in a little bubble, during those times. And this is one time when you can really cross-pollinate across the whole country. You get to meet your cohort of neurosurgeons, and at least for the next decade, if not decades and decades, that's your group, that's your cohort. And so you'll see them at sub-internship boot camps and different training sessions and meetings and things like that over the coming years and decades. And so hopefully you just enjoy it and get to meet a lot of residents and faculty that at least it could at least start the beginning of a long-term relationship. And so hopefully have just a wonderful time.
Going into that, can you each describe just kind of briefly what the interview day at your institution entails?
I'll go, I guess. So we have 3 interview days. I think we interview around 14 or 15 each day, so like 45 or so. We have during COVID, we changed our format from just like 12 rooms to thematic rooms. A lot of the subspecialties were recommending this, cutting down Zoom fatigue. We actually got our interviews down to like 3 hours on Zoom because it was kind of what people could tolerate. And so we kind of have like loosely thematic rooms about leadership and about grit. And we have a research room where we give the applicants a slide that they're asked to bring. They have 5 minutes to talk about their research or something that they didn't have in their application. And then 2 or 3 faculty in each of the rooms will talk to them about it. We have like an education room, a couple of resident room, a research room. So it's about half a day or so of the formal interview part, lunch, tours. I think probably not that dissimilar. The only thing that we changed was we got rid of like the 12 rooms where you were saying the same thing over and over again to 12 different people, and tried to create unique rooms that allowed us then to come together at the end of the day and share different perspectives as faculty. and compare our notes on a wide range of topics as opposed to having them recite their research, ad nauseum. So that's been a nice change for us over the last 3 or 4 years.
Yeah, we're somewhat similar. We have always done it back-to-back days. And so we shut down the OR and all of our faculty interview. And we interview everyone on either day one or day two. And we like doing that because then it's fresh in mind, and then we can sort of rank everybody and not necessarily have some type of recall bias. It is a long day for the faculty. It's a long day for the residents. We've tried to, resident applicants, I should say. We do try to reduce the number of rooms so it's not the same thing. And we do have similar thematic around some type of standardized questions. We also intermix a couple of cases. And we used to do that, then went away from it. And we actually find that that's actually an interesting way to mostly see how somebody thinks through a problem. It doesn't even matter if you get it right. It really just matters sort of how you think. And then there's obviously the dinner and there's the tour and the getting to know the place, because a lot of it is, are you going to spend 7 years here and you want to see, what Boston's like and what the culture is like. And we love our residents, and our residents are pretty happy, and we want our applicants to see and hang out with our residents. We also have our chief residents interview as well, which we just started doing probably about 5 years ago, and really love doing that because a lot of the input from those closer in age sometimes is super interesting. One of the things I find most interesting is if you look at our faculty, they could not be more different as human beings. And if you look at our applicants, they could not be more different. So we don't look for sort of a cookie cutter, but almost always all our faculty will pick about the same group and rank very similarly. And it just goes to tell you that if you really use sort of this group idea, everybody sees a little bit differently, but collectively it's probably wiser. And I think it sounds like that's what they do at Cornell similarly. And we come together and bring all that knowledge and then hopefully have picked the right choice.
Brian, how many folks do you interview over those 2 days?
We do about 15 to 20 per day. So it went up a little bit during COVID. It used to be about 12, so about 25 to 30 total, and now we're about 30 to 40. So we'll probably start to come down a little bit. But the COVID time, we just didn't know if anybody could rank based on Zoom. So
I'm going to question you again, and maybe the same
yeah.
questions to Raj. Sub-Is included in that, or are they separated out as a different cohort?
Yeah, it's a great question. They're included in that, but we don't interview all of our sub-Is.
Great. Okay, that was my third question. Good.
Yeah. Would you guys, are your sub-Is included in that, or is it a separate cohort?
Yeah, sub-Is included. We have generally interviewed everyone out of a sense of courtesy, but it's curious. I've been learning that there's a good degree of difference around the country, so this is a really interesting forum to discuss that.
Yeah. How about you, Raj?
Yeah. So for us, we do a little bit of both. So we make sure that when the sub-Is are here, they all sort of have a sit-down interview with the chair, with the program director, and we have 4 assistant program directors. So it's a lot. They meet much of the department while they're here, and so we do let folks know that, hey, if you come as a sub-I, you will get that interview. There is a subset of folks, if we particularly want to know more about someone, typically in a positive way, we'd ask them to come back for one of our 3 interviews. So we have 2 in-person interviews. So we have 2 in December and 1 in January. There is some recall bias with that, but to try to get, it's just been challenging to, in December, there's a lot of holidays towards the end and this and that. So we do have 3 days. I think they're broadly pretty similar in that we have about 12 rooms. There are standardized questions for each faculty, and there's 2 faculty in each room. It is a long day. We do have dinner the night before, and then a reception, a dinner with the residents the night before, and a reception the night of, like early evening after the interviews. And and if people have to catch a flight, no problem. But that's how we do it.
So what's the total number for Hopkins?
So, I'm sorry. Yeah, we have it did used to be around 12, and now it's creeped up to somewhere in that 15 to 18 range. So about it ends up being about 40, 45 people between the 3 dates.
It's pretty similar for all 3, actually.
Yep.
I'd like to ask about pre-residency fellowships. Do you consider them a strong addition to an applicant's file, or do you view them differently depending on their circumstances that led the applicant to pursue one?
I can address that. I think, at least from my perspective, um, I, I would suggest that a person who's maybe thinking about doing a pre-residency fellowship really think about um, what their if they had applied before, what their application might be lacking, and if that would fill that gap. Uh, and I would also suggest that they are very thoughtful about where they do their pre-residency fellowship, and being very conscious of where those pre-residency fellows go afterwards. I think there are some places that have a track record of getting people into residency programs, and other places that have a different record. And I think it's important to know what you're getting into with that.
Ryan, anything? I don't have a great experience with pre-residency fellows, just not a very common feature for our applicant pool. I don't feel terribly pro or con just because I don't have a good basis for it. I know that a fair number of the international students who have come and done them, I would say that it seems to me that the vast majority of IMGs who have come to the US and done research fellowships or pre-residency fellowships, you're going to have, a massively higher chance of ranking at that program during which you have spent those couple of years. I mean, that's where you're going to have the relationships. Clearly, there's some part of your CV that needs to be bolstered, or needs to be, a little bit more prominent. And when you do that, those opportunities are going to present themselves mostly in person. So I just don't have a huge data set to work from to answer that, except to say that that's where you're going to want to focus your energies and pick those places really wisely, because that's going to be just like your sub-Is. If it hasn't been said today already, I think it's been implied, your best chance of matching at a program is going to be somewhere where you've spent a month and a year, right? So that should be intuitive, and I think that bears out in the data.
Yeah, that's really well said, and I think that's exactly the point.
I think we have time for. Oh, go ahead.
Can I say one other thing, just for if someone is an IMG, because they will sometimes do pre-residency fellowships, if they know ahead of time while they are still a medical student, if they know that they're interested in neurosurgery, it could be very helpful to do 2 or 3 sub-internships. And I would say that is much more useful. I would say that's a better use of time if you plan ahead for that than doing a pre-residency fellowship. It's you want to try to check off, you want to avoid those yellow and red flags. So saying that you did 2 or 3 sub-internships during medical school, it's a green flag. It checks the box a little bit easier.
I think we have time for just one more question. I was wondering if you all could share your thoughts on post-interview communication. Do you appreciate thank you emails from your applicants? And not saying any of you would do this or any of your programs, but how do you recommend an applicant handles post-interview communication from the program to the applicant?
Brian,
Yeah, I would
first on this one.
Brian, is Brian going first?
No, go for it, Raj.
I was gonna say our program historically, I think, has not done a great job of the program reaching out to students. And I think we're trying to be a bit more active now, but we have to be thoughtful about, we as a program have to be thoughtful about what kind of signal that sends. We don't want to tell 20 people we loved you, because then it maybe doesn't mean, what does love mean then at that point. But I think different programs have different cultures when it comes to outreach. I would say for a student reaching out to a program, I don't think you should feel obligated to, personally, I don't think you should feel obligated to reach out to every program and every person that you met at every program. But if you did really resonate with a handful of places and they are at the top of your list, or, I think it's probably important to let them know that at some point. And I would say probably even more important than that is having your mentor, your advisor, your sponsor, your chair, as it gets to that January, February, especially time period, there's it's helpful to have that information before or that impression from people that care about you and that mentor you prior to our rank list going in, at least at our place.
Yeah, I would echo that and say that it's always nice if somebody writes a note that they had either appreciated it or there was something. Almost always, it's usually a thank you and then a question of some sort that they may have thought of or didn't ask or subsequently just wanted to reach out. We're pretty open. We usually provide our cell phone and our email. We don't contact applicants unless they contact us. We kind of follow the rules. I know we're in the minority, and we just believe in following the rules. And I think to Raj's point, we've all been on the other side of that coin, and you kind of have to remember that. I think when you're a program, that you just want to do right by all the applicants. And that's about it. I think the thing I would advise people not to do if they are going to do thank yous is to write the same exact thank you email to all whatever 25 faculty, because you don't need to do that. It's okay. But B, it actually looks worse if you just copy and paste and like, dear Brian, dear Jeff, dear Raj, and it's the same exact one line. But a general thank you is probably not a bad thing, but it's definitely not required. We don't rank people higher or lower based on what they or if they respond.
Yeah, you stole my joke there. That's definitely the case, Brian. As program directors, all the faculty send us the notes so that we can see. And so we all get them at the exact same time. It seems bad. What I would do, just to give you a little more granular advice in terms of what to do, is to write 1 or 2 targeted notes if you really like a program with something memorable in the note about the interview or the day or what they took away from the program. Don't just say, thank you for interviewing me. Like, we all know that's great. It's not going to resonate. It's fine and it's good. But like the other 2 guys said, we're not judging your application on whether or not you send us a pro forma thank you note. But if you write, say, Dr. Nahed, I really appreciate the conversation we had about this. I thought about it more and blah, blah, blah. Like, he will remember that, and we'll all remember those notes. And when we come down to, that rank list, that may be something that is, a tangible moment that will be reflected on. So be genuine and be authentic. And I think that will come across.
Great, thank you so much. Well, we're almost perfectly on time here at 59. So I really want to thank our panelists for taking your time to share your insights and to hopefully demystifying the match process and interview process a little bit for our listeners. And if you have any final thoughts, feel free to share them. But otherwise, we'll close the webinar and just thank you all again so much for your time. It was really, really valuable.
If you don't mind just sharing our emails, I didn't put mine out there. I don't know if Brian wants it or not, but certainly feel free
Totally
to
fine.
put it in an email. And if there's specific questions about our programs, we're all very happy to reach out and give you our thoughts. And thanks for organizing this, guys. It was awesome.
All right, thanks, guys.
Thank you all. Have a great night.
Thank you, everybody.
Hey, everyone. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Yeah.